change the world. On we go.
Hey friends of the internet, welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. My name is Steph. I'm filming in a different location because due to daylight savings, by the time I get home from work lately, there is not enough sunlight for me to be able to film in the natural sunlight that I've been trying to film from. So I'm filming from my office because the light in here is working for me right now. Hi, welcome to a book tour. I'm actually really excited to do this because I haven't done a book tour in quite a long time. My wonderful friend Eric over at Break Even Books reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to be part of a book tour for a nonfiction book? And I said, yeah, that sounds really cool. Something that I do read on this channel pretty frequently, I would say, is one of my most read genres might be nonfiction. I was sent a digital copy of the book Disrobed by the author Tang in exchange for a review. But it's a really short nonfiction book. It's only about 164 pages, and Disrobed is about how clothing predicts economic values, saves lives, and determines the future. This book very much felt like I was reading a dissertation or a master's thesis around clothing and the psychology of why we choose to wear certain clothes, or how clothes reflect the state, our cognitive states and our cognitive biases. It talks about confirmation bias, and it talks about the politics of clothes. So I feel like the title is pretty spot on. Something that I noticed that happened a lot in here was that what made it feel like a thesis dissertation, which is not a bad thing by any means, like it really did start with the beginning of the chapter saying like, here's something really might be arbitrary or might be abstract, and makes you think that it doesn't relate to clothes in any way. Like, I mean, some things definitely did relate to clothes, and you can kind of see the through line there of agriculture or farming or global warming, right? Because when you think about it, clothes are fibers. Although there are lots of other synthetic materials that are covered in this book as well, about what we are using, such as rayon and other materials, to finding more ecological means of creating clothes, that there is a want and a need for us to find more eco-friendly ways of creating fibers, but also that it's very expensive. So things like that, where there were these chapters of information about the current state of the process and the agriculture around clothes between natural fibers and the creation of synthetic fibers, was extremely interesting. But other chapters were really started off with something a lot different, like maybe something political, or the ways in which different cultures choose to express themselves, and what happens when you live in a maybe urban area or a developed area in which you have different cultures that are coming together, and those cultures are having a culture clash. There is definitely a element of an analysis of what it means to be someone who has an influence. And in this case, it was very much looking at those who are of the upper echelons of society, who have the means to be able to influence the market, but also what investing in certain companies and products does as far as giving research to organizations who are using AI to be able to track what it is that you're purchasing, and how that also influences fast fashion and technology and buying power and consumerism. So there's a lot that goes on here. I think the author does pretty much a good job of explaining the through line that clothes have with a lot of these different subject areas, just because clothes are a commodity that we all need. Clothes are a universal necessity in order to function in our society, or to function in modern day society. And the ways in which we consume those clothes have a direct relationship to the structure of the economy, to gender biases, to enforcing or breaking gender norms, to cultural symbolism, and to agriculture. There were a couple sections of the book where I was really happy to see that the author kind of went through the history of how the economy has continued to disenfranchise women, but how women have kind of used clothes as a mean of pushing back against the patriarchy. And at first I was a little bit nervous, because I feel like when a lot of people start to think about the economy of clothes, they think that a large portion of that is influenced by women. But what I like that this book did was it really also spent some time talking about the influence that men have on clothes, that men portray through the media and through their own mode of communication with symbolism and quality of clothes, like the difference between quality of clothes for men versus women, which I can totally relate to, right? Being a woman and I go shopping, I personally hate that I can go to a store and not find any shirts that I like because they're all of a poorer quality than the clothes that are in the men's section because they're considered to be fast fashion. So they might be see-through. They might require me to wear an undershirt that I didn't want to have to wear. Maybe I don't like wearing so many layers with this particular outfit, right? So the structure of women's clothes versus men's clothes is completely different. And that's also a product of the economy and certain biases that are in the clothing industry. And so it's easy for people to kind of blame women's fashion and use that as a scapegoat as saying like this is the issue, that it's a women's issue, but it's really not. That we can't really separate the fact that there is bias in media, and that media is a major factor in how people determine what it is that they're going to purchase, right? I think the same conversation can be had about a lot of different products. It doesn't necessarily, I think, only boil down to fashion and clothing, but that is a huge factor of it. So I think we can also have this conversation in other areas of economics. What I did like that this author did was that they brought in art a lot. I was really excited to see that that's kind of where the conversation of this book started. It was talking about the art market, and I think specifically was referencing, it might have been the Sex Pistols, I think, but someone who said, you know, that their clothing from a certain era in history was up for auction. I don't know if it was at Sotheby's or it was some major auction house, and that the person who made these clothes or that made, they know what they made, but what the auction house was selling, they said, that's not mine. I didn't make that, but they're authenticating it and saying that it's real. But that the auction house didn't necessarily want to hear that information because it would mean that they've lost out on their investment, and it's easier to just move that product along rather than to get an actual letter of authentication from the artist because they're claiming, oh, you probably just forgot or something like that. And that's not unheard of, especially in the art world. I see that all the time. So, I mean, art is sticky business because it really is only as valuable as the last person that purchased it. That's also a conversation that's worth its own entire video. But you know, the value of art is so hard because there's so many systems that can go from, you know, I value this art because of the amount of time and money that I put into it, the amount of energy, the amount of resources, but then there's art that's a lot more abstract. And so how do you place value on something like that? So really it's a social currency. And that being said, I think it was really important that the author started with that as a place for this book to talk about how fashion has a lot of symbolism, and that symbolism and social currency transfers into other areas of the economy. So I thought that was pretty great. Definitely a lot of trigger warnings in here, by the way. So I'll just kind of like list them on the screen so that you can see. And this is the only part of the book where I feel like I see why the author did these things and included all this information about different states of economies and police force and government and values in different cultures around the world, because there were sections where it was using a lot of statistics to talk about how different populations of the world value different things. And if we take the statistic populations of like the different classes in different countries and what their purchase power is, that we can kind of see trends, and that these trends are the predictive part of this whole book. That being said, when it does touch on those things, for example, there is a section where it touches on the idea of this. And so that being said, it gives you a little bit of history about, I think it was like maybe within the past decade or the past 15 years in France specifically, was where France was experiencing this. And so because of that, there was a public backlash against the burkini, which was this new kind of more conservative dressed swimwear or like beachwear, particularly that was being purchased by Muslim women in France. There was a public outcry of Islamophobia based on those attacks that happened, but just because those attacks happen doesn't necessarily mean that they were conducted by individuals who were of the Muslim faith, who were being generally punished in the sense of that this new outfit that allowed them to retain their values in public spaces was being challenged politically and saying that it's not suitable for public wear, even though that people are allowed to go like topless there, right? So it's like this catch-22, this kind of double standard because of misplaced values, but that these changes in politics really do reflect what the general public is thinking, and you can see evidence of that. Even if you don't know the events that are happening, you can still kind of understand what the general public stance in a certain area or in a certain culture are based on the movement of clothing. Both clothing affects politics and that politics affects clothing, because there was another chapter after that where it talked about how certain people who are running for different areas of politics have to be careful of what colors they wear and the scuff on their shoes and things like that, because all of it is a message. Essentially, it's about the semiotics of clothes. So I thought all of that was extremely fascinating, but I say all that to say that that was a little bit of the book where I was like, okay, I see what you're trying to say here. I might have just like kind of condensed it a little bit more because some of those areas stretched a little bit too long for me, and I'm like, all right, I understand what you're trying to say, but also I know that the author seemed very much wanting to get their point across. And while the book is still relatively short, I don't think that was a major factor in why I ultimately decided to give this like a 3.5. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from it. It's definitely not my most favorite nonfiction book. I do recommend this if you're someone who's either interested in economics, who's interested in fashion, or if you're someone who's like me and is interested in anything that kind of influences the art market. Kind of felt like I was watching an episode or like reading an episode of like a Discovery Channel or National Geographic, so that was pretty cool. But anyway, thank you so much to the author for sending this to me. Thank you so much, Eric from Break Even Books, my buddy, for sending this over to me and hooking me up as part of this book tour. I'm hoping to do a lot more of these if I can. And I think nonfiction book tours might just be my thing. So that's pretty awesome. Anyway, I post videos whenever I feel like it, and I'll catch you later. Bye.
I'm legal.